Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Ni hao. Buenos dias. Ezeche. Buenas tardes. Aquaba. Welcoming. What up, bro? This is Cafe Melange, week 21. And each week, in my capacity with Asana Ashram, I do studies from different traditions of earth, studying from scriptures, and I share weekly considerations based on the readings for each week. And often, obviously, it intrinsically relates to the experience of Mélanger. And oftentimes, what I share in this form is predicated upon what is shared within the weekly consideration and edition. So, with that, and amidst the additional things that I'm working on, for the sake of simplicity, congruence, and additionally, what I'm planning is being increasingly intentional and direct with the connection between what I share here, even though this isn't supposed to be a forum per se, or like a lecture or whatever, but basically, as it is at the moment, uh, in these talks, joints, or whatever, sermons, Dharma talks, whatever, Devara, whatever, to connect the theme of the weekly consideration with what I share here. But again, specifically within the context of Melange. So, in both of these fora, um, within the past few weeks, I emphasize non-predatory discipline and Melange culture and experience. And so, what I'm sharing today is basically like a summary of the spiel um, of Mélanger civilization. It can be understood as non-predatory civilization. And the actual weekly consideration theme for this week is non-predatory clans, societies, and civilization. And so something like concentric circles to the larger experience of the shared collective. So this is like the culmination of stuff I've been working on, or I've been involved with for a number of years, even decades. And so it's still like in a rudimentary stage of like presentation, in terms of like conciseness and refinement. However, um, it's very substantive in terms of like the message and the guidance. Even the tangibility. However, that being said, because I got I got lots of pots on the stove at the moment, and little sleep in the past 24 hours, 24 hours. So what I plan to do at this moment is just basically just go through the notes. I got notes. So neat, so fresh, so clean. Oh, that's not it. So this is like the entire spiel of like from 0 to 100 of like the process, the guidance, and everything else. From where we exactly are at this moment to where we are, where we each respectively and collectively want to be, or supposed to be, or already are, and maybe just don't know as much as we want to. So, uh, like I said, this is like a lot of compact stuff. This is like the tip of the iceberg, and it warrants a lot of like explanation, like sessions on different components of this. However, I ain't doing that today, so I'm just gonna like go through the notes without even like explaining stuff too tough, because the intention is to be expedient in this joint, and to see if there's some other things I can share, just like in terms of past week's experience. So here we go. There are actually like 4 stages in this joint, and again, this is a rudimentary outline. It's just what I put together last night as I was in those the very few moments of rest, just drawing a sketch outline, a sturdy sketch outline um, of this sequence. So basically, it takes us, or it shows us, or it shares with us. Again, like I said, where we are at this exact moment, with our struggles and our triumphs and everything else, wherever we are, individually and collectively, and then as as respective individuals, as respective families, as respective circles and villages, societies, and then as a civilization, um, what we want to be and how we get there. How do we do that? Um, this shares like concepts, principles, teachings from the different traditions of Earth that are ancient and eternal and very, very contemporary. So here it is. Quattro stages. So the first stage is awakening. I'll say what each stage is. Yeah, fourth stage ain't got a name. So the stages are this: awakening is first, uno. Número dos is strengthening. Número tres is uplifting, and then número cuatro is like next steps. So that's what it is. So for número uno, awakening, basically that's just like us recognizing who we are and who each other, who we are individually, but who we are like respectively and collectively. And that means the divine presence. We can say God, we can say Tao, we can say Brahma, we can say Allah, we can say Hashem, we can say whatever we understand as the ultimate reality, the universal love, whatever, it's there and it's within each of us. And so that's like the primary awakening. It's just like just thinking about that. I'm not explaining things I'm not supposed to be doing at the moment. So that's it. From that, recognizing the divine presence within ourselves and the merit and the worth that's within us, um, and that existing within all as well, having due respect for all. But then also being mindful of our ancestors and our heritage, recognizing that we are part of this esoteric, eternal existence or trans existence, meaning beyond existence, but we're also part of this temple existence. Um, and there's the confluence of the two, and our ancestors are a huge part of that harmony, that understanding, that guidance, that wisdom of how to be reconciled in this earth. So it's a matter of being mindful of that, where our ancestors are, and then like honoring our ancestors and our heritage, particularly as Melange brethren. Um, so that's that. And then having well-being, having it, like I said, a respect for all, and that includes well-being for all. And that leads us to just the mere consideration of non-predatory civilization. Like, can we actually live without feeding off of the suffering and the death and the pain of others, whether that's other human beings or even other sentient beings? What does non-predatory civilization look like? What does non-predatory behavior look like? But before we get into like the details of that, just think about that and just consider like even just like the possibility of that. Um, so then, with that, there's a mindfulness of ethical discipline. Like if there is some type of harmony that we want to experience, we have to have some kind of like ethics and like discipline and protocols and virtues to practice. And so what we share is with Melange is honesty, sobriety, veganism, marital fidelity, and ethical economics. And that ain't me talking. That's ancient traditions talking. And there's additional details with that. But just thinking about that, like what's the benefit of each one? Honesty, sobriety, veganism, marital fidelity, and ethical economics. Thoroughly think about, yes, some of them might not be convincing up front, immediately, off jump, off rip. But thinking about that and what's like the pluses and the minuses that come with that, with each one. Um, and again, this ain't committing, this ain't practicing, it's just thinking about it. And then the third one is patience. Patience is the foundation of all benevolent things that humanity experiences: love, truth, acceptance, forgiveness, uh, everything. Um, and there's a formula to cultivating our patience, or stacking our patience chips, like cultivating a bank of patience. And it's three steps, tres steps. Numero uno, being still. Just stop, just stop. Numero dos, be quiet, shut up. And numero tres, be honest. And you got to listen, because if you're already stopped and quiet, you're already listening. And if somebody's talking BS to you, you don't have to listen to that either, because if it's not honest, you don't got to worry about that. But consider what is honest, and just focus on that. And when we do that, oh, we're stacking up patience at that point. It's like lifting weights. Um, we patience, light weights, didn't work too much. But anyways, that's stage one, awakening. And so with that patience, we're better equipped to go into stage numero dos. Stage numero dos, haha, is that strengthening. And so again, we focus on the knowledge of self, that ultimate reality, God, Tao, however we refer to it, um, ourself, and our relationship with the ultimate reality, our ancestors, and then all throughout the universe. And that includes all people, all animals, all sentient beings, all life, all plants, all elements, soil, earth, fire, air, water, shade, seed, all that. Our relationship with all that, because that's the nature of our well-being. So it's just a matter of having a knowledge of self and just being mindful of that. And so when we're experiencing certain affliction, um, we might perceive ourselves as being slaves, enslaved, or oppressed, or being done wrong. Even when we are extremely rich and affluent and quote unquote privileged, guess what? That's slavery too, just in a different nature. So all of us are experiencing suffering, and when we are frustrated and aggrieved with that suffering, we can feel trapped. We can feel ensnared by that suffering. So that's the experience of enslavement. We can blame others for it and try to feel better about it other ways, but when we want to actually be a harmony, peace with ourselves and everything else, then it's a matter of recognizing the nature of that suffering. So there's a stage of progression. It goes from slave, soldier, student, sage, and then saint. So basically, this is the thing. Uh, in an experience of having an experience of powerlessness, of being afflicted, being oppressed, and additionally, that's the slave. When the slave begins to awaken and be aware of that and gets frustrated, like, oh no, this ain't it. Some slaves might be docile, but some people are like, no, I ain't accepting this. There's got to be something better. So the natural tendency is to revolt, is to stand up, to like, yo, fight against it, because that's like the immediate reaction. But obviously, like their conditions, it's difficult to do that. So some soldiers, that's when the slave turns into the soldier, to like stand up against the whatever entities or whatever conditions or systems or whatever that are perpetuating that kind of experience of affliction or oppression. Um, so that's the slave becomes a soldier. Now with the soldier, the nature of that, the duration of that can vary. The soldier can actually be the revolutionary and win and become the potentate. Um, but oftentimes it gets quelled because like there are huge conditions that are preventing that kind of success. So eventually, in either situation, eventually the soldier has to become a student and study the game, understand, what's going on here, how does this thing work, and what can I do to like make things better in this situation. So student, now that can be years, that can be lifetime, that can be generations. Student, study the game, understand how things work, understand what is most proficient and additionally, in order to effectuate the conditions and the experience, the situation that is favorable, that is desirable, that's healthy, that's righteous, and additional. So that is the student. Now, eventually, this, what the student learns is like, discipline, and like, okay, I gotta do this. I gotta like eat healthy. I gotta like be modest in what I take. I gotta like be righteous in how I interact with others. The student is learning these things because they've seen how it works with other people, and like things like respect and trust, and forgiveness and things like that, loyalty. Um, the student begins to understand how it works, but then the student also has to recognize, it ain't just a matter of like studying and like watching and taking notes. You got to practice it too. So that's when the student becomes the sage, because the sage is just a practitioner of the elements, a true sage. Uh, uh, there are, be careful. There are students who like to talk and like may share what they've observed, but don't actually practice it. That's not the sage. The sage is one who actually practiced and teaches through the doing of it. And it may explain some of it in the process to other students, to other sages, but that's what the sage does, is practice the lessons. So The slave becomes the soldier, becomes the student, becomes the sage. And again, the sage, that's like the high. But there's like another, like in parentheses, another stage of like the saint, where it's like taking the sage thing to another level. But I leave that alone for the moment because I'm explaining a lot already. So that's the stages. Now, speaking of sages, there are teachers within our earth tradition that provide us with guidance about how to go about this process of awakening and strengthening. Um, Confucius teaches us about ethics, ethical discipline, the gentleman, the benevolent man, and also the importance of songs and rituals. And Socrates um, teaches us about the importance of stories. And so there's the consideration of that, those like three elements. One element being ethical discipline, being righteous in our behavior. The second joint being songs and stories, learning about our cultural heritage, and the principles that are conveyed through those stories and songs. And then press is the rituals, the routines on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a upasada basis, on a month-to-month basis, on a yearly basis, life cycle events. And additionally, what are the rituals that strengthen our connection with ourselves, individually, with ourselves as community, but also with ourselves eternally, with our ancestors, and conveying it. So that's the trifecta. So that's what the student studies and begins to practice. So when it comes to ethical discipline, the Buddha shares within the Kuddhidanta Sutta a fivefold ethical discipline that includes, guess what I said just before: honesty, sobriety, veganism, marital fidelity, and ethical economics. That's what the Buddha teaches in the Kuddhidanta Sutta. This is emphasized and reiterated or further iterated within effectively the concluding five single mitzvot of the Ten Commandments within the Torah of Israeli tradition. So basically, it's do not kill, do not steal, do not commit adultery, um, and do not lie, do not bear false witness. And then the fifth one is do not covet. But it's not exactly a thing. But then there are additional teachings within the Torah that also emphasize uh, sobriety. And our Israeli brethren go, hold up, wait a minute. Now, what about wine on Shabbat? But it goes into details with that. But anyways, um, it's emphasized. The same principles are emphasized. Uh, Jesus emphasizes this when a brother goes up to him and says, "What do I have to do to get eternal life?" And Jesus recites those exact same principles from the Torah, and he adds additional ones about honoring far and more, and then the golden rule, obviously, as well. But this is also in Jain tradition. We can look at the Anivrata. I'm getting into details at this point, but the Anivrata is ahimsa, ahimsa, anikadva, aparigraha, brahmacharya, aseccha. I didn't say it in the right order, but that's basically it. It means non-violence, truthfulness, um, non-possessiveness, uh, ahimsa, as, ahimsa, satya, ahimsa, non-violence, satya, truthfulness, aseccha, non-stealing, aparigraha, non-possessiveness, and brahmacharya, chastity. So again, it's very similar, and also in Jain tradition there is sobriety. There is a prohibition against alcohol and intoxicants. Um, this is shared within the Quran. Specifically, we can look at Surah Bani al Israel, and the teachings, the guidance that are provided within the Quran, specifically against not killing, and additionally, now again, you can say, wait a minute, the Quran says you can eat meat, not just it can eat, but you got to eat meat almost. So that can be that's we can have discussions about that. We can also discuss about what the Sunnah says about the behavior of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Pronunciation is being improved. Um, but specifically, we can look at Surah Al-Bani Israel as an emphasis, as a confirmation, as a proclamation of this fivefold ethic. Um, Patanjali teaches this within Hindu tradition as well. The same exact five principles as the Anivrata within Jain tradition. So again, those. That's like a huge breadth of human civilization, of Earth traditions and Earth civilization. that emphasize these principles. And this is recognized within world ethos by the Parliament of the World Religions. Again, it's other than exactly coinciding, but the world ethos that's professed by the Parliament of the World Religions is four principles: uh, nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, and basically sexual propriety. Um, a lot of people are holding on to the intoxicants. So, anyways, ethical discipline, it strengthens us. Um, that's some tangibility right there. Now, in terms of songs and stories, um, this is so essential. Um, it's a matter of getting connected with our ancestors, strengthening our connection with our ancestors, um, our connection with amongst our generations, the elders, the adults, and the children. Having the same frame of reference, knowing the same songs, being able to sing the same songs by heart, by memorization, celebrate the same songs, celebrate the same stories, sit at the dinner table, and then talk about these stories, particularly amongst our rituals. And additionally, um, that's so important for social relationships, social interaction, understanding, teaching, cohesion within amongst families, amongst villages, amongst communities, amongst societies, amongst civilizations. So um, stories and songs, so essential. And Socrates emphasizes that yes, we need to know like the factual stories, the things that actually happen, that we understand actually happen in this life, from our forebears, our ancestors, our prophets, and our sages. But also, it's beneficial. It's actually important to understand or to share fictional stories, those things that we recognize as creative storytelling or creative narratives, because that provides us with perspective and the principles that are healthy and strengthening within our lives. So, um, for Millinger Brethren, these songs and these storytellings are a critical part of uh, strengthening our experience of our own respective Mélanger heritage, whatever our mixed heritage is, our collective Mélanger heritage of Earth, the major um, elements of the respective cultural traditions of the entire Earth, and thus our experience of pluralism, healthy respect and understanding and interaction, cooperation, and trust amongst the different cultures and traditions and peoples of the Earth, and beings of the Earth. So songs and stories essential for that. So, and again, specifically for Mélanger Brethren, it is important for us to know our personal heritage, where our respective fars come from, where our Moors come from, to know that specificity as much as optimally, um, and to honor that optimally as well. But then also, we also, as Mélanger Brethren, we also benefit from knowing, aligning ourselves with the entirety of Earth, because as a collective, and we talk about like allegiance and stuff like that, there aren't any boundaries within Mélanger, and so when we identify as mixed, that has an infinite different ways of defining it. But it's helpful for us to have a uniform definition of that, and not just a definition, but a culture and protocols and a way of doing things and an understanding and a cooperation as a collective of Mélanger brethren, regardless of what our mixes are. And so there's that duality of knowing our personal heritage and then also knowing our collective Mélanger heritage. And that goes along the lines of being world citizens, um, and and then also providing our service along those lines as well. Whatever talent that we're blessed with, applying that for the well-being of those immediately around us, but also with a mindfulness and a direct intentionality with the collective of the entire Earth. And there's additional amount of that in the next stage, um, or actually a little bit further here. Um, So yeah, that's about it. Also, particularly emphasizing service, regardless of what our occupation is, whether it's a healer, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a laborer or whatever, like doing it with a mindfulness of the earth, the entirety of earth as a world citizen, as in accordance with our Mélanger heritage, um, and uh, that being said, it's also beneficial to be mindful of what services, what occupations, what professions are increasingly um, benefited by our melange experience, diplomacy, um, uh, anthropology, social studies, what are referred to as liberal arts, the humanities, places or professions where empathy, understanding, cross-cultural interaction, commerce, business, economics, politics, all that, even religion and spirituality. Um, there is a certain pluralistic advantage for being melange. So the consideration is how we being intentional with that and how we what we study and how we prepare ourselves for our careers, for our occupations, and providing the service. It's about to get noisy in here because they're serving food. Um, Food is being served, and we're only on stage 2 at this point. Maybe 10 minutes. We'll see how we do. So one other thing with the it's actually should be in ethical discipline, but I'm gonna put it here as a song. Haha. Wealth ethos. So I mentioned briefly before wealth ethos from the Parliament of World Religions. It's actually a thing beyond the Parliament, and it just signifies a shared set of principles and ethics that are shared by the different traditions of the earth. And I mentioned different variations of that. There's a list of principles that can be identified, and I share here. Ahimsa, Ubuntu, Veritas, Chaya, Shu, Maka, Huga, Samadhi, Shema, Shibono, Nara. So I am precluded from getting to the details of what each one of those means, but actually they're teachings from different traditions about different principles with different explanations and understandings and practices. So there's a song, Ahimsa, Ubuntu, Veritas, Chaya, Shu, Mako, Huga, Samadhi, Shema, Shibono, Nara. Makes it easier to understand and practice and recite. So there's a lot that I've already shared on this before, so I just leave it at that. Now, the third element that I mentioned is rituals. So, like I said, this is a way of connecting, strengthening our connection with God, Tao, Brahman, Allah, Hashem, uh, but also through our ancestors, through the legacy that our ancestors provided with us, through our elders, with our peers, with our children, and as communities, as families, as villages, as societies, as a civilization. And it's something that's beyond just somebody making a decree and saying, "Oh, we should do this," or a group saying, "Oh, we should do this." It's already the thing. So these are occasions where we are called upon to socialize with each other, to talk, to break bread, to share lessons, to share teachings, to share histories, and to concentrate on that and give us guidance on how we continue in this life at this moment. So rituals are very important. And again, that's along the lines of our personal heritage and honoring the rituals within our personal heritage, but then also honoring the rituals in our earth heritage, particularly as Melange brethren. And one of the things that we as Asan Ashram and Melange Sangha and Melange Ethos Institute come, provide within the past year is a set or a sequence of eight rituals to practice during the course of the year that are attuned with major practices, major observances within the major predominant traditions of the earth. And it's other than a direct observation of each of these observances, but it's a reminder, a call to like be mindful of this and saying, hey, this is coming up. Let's be mindful of this, regardless of whether we observe that specific tradition or otherwise. But it's a matter of like recognizing like our earth is getting ready for this, and it's like a serious thing. So let's be mindful of this and how this affects us, and how we affect that, and how we can be duly respectful and harmonious with that. And so this is like serious, and particularly many Melange brethren tend to be secular and very a-religious because within religiosity there's a significant amount of authoritarianism and accusations of inauthenticity, and so there's just a strong anti-authoritarian vibe amongst many Melange brethren. Very understandable, but it's a matter of recognizing that this religion thing and these rituals have a nature and a truth beyond what our gripes are, as legit as our gripes may be. And so it's a matter of like, we got to deal with this one way or another. Let's be mindful of this and optimally understand it, and cultivate respect and be harmonious with that. So that's what this is. So that's the consideration with rituals. Now, going on to the next joint. So as we conclude or wrap up this stage of dose of strengthening, there are a few considerations. One is resolution. Um, and this is a matter of recognizing, again, our divinely given purpose, divinely given. I didn't mention this too much actually at the beginning. I meant to do that. At the very beginning of awakening, when we recognize the divine presence, it's also a matter of recognizing our divine purpose. That like we are here for a reason, and we are here. I mentioned the notion of providing service, but it's not just a matter of service. It's a matter of recognizing that in our merit, in our worth of being here. It's not just a matter of just having this divine presence within ourselves. It's a matter of having like a mandate. Let me be mindful of this. Having a guidance, a calling. Each of us has a divine purpose in this life, and to provide for the well-being of others. And we do it in different ways because we have different talents. And so that's part of the process of awakening, of recognizing that divine purpose with the divine presence. And then I was meant to say that at the beginning of this joint. But then as we kind of like go through this process of recognizing the ethical discipline and the stories and songs and the rituals, um, to have an additional amount of intentionality in actually like going from the student to the sage of actually practicing this to a certain degree, uh, and 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 as a way of encouraging us to do that, having additional motivation. It's a matter of again recognizing the divine purpose, like the divine presence within ourselves, like give this merit and affirmation, confirmation, and then also the divine purpose, recognizing that we have a talent, we have a skill, we have a trait, we have a gift that we're blessed with, and that is, but we're blessed with the purpose of sharing it with others and improving the well-being of others. And so uh, we identify what that is. We develop that. We hone our craft, develop our skills, and then we provide our service to promote the well-being of others. And through that service, we are compensated with nourishment and sustenance, and additionally to sustain ourselves within this life. And that's the nature of the relationship with others, with other beings, with the elements, with our ancestors, with God and the universe as well. So again, we revert back to the notion of patience, as in this process, because amidst the ebbs and flows and the challenges and everything, we have to like be patient with ourselves and forgiving and understanding and persevering, gambaru. Um, and so we have patience, we have discipline, and we strengthen our routines. Now, the final part of this sage dose is divest, invest, and co-vest, meaning like when we start to awaken and strengthen ourselves, it's a matter of recognizing the things that are helpful for ourselves and healing the things that are harmful for ourselves, and how to like gravitate increasingly towards the things that are healthy and helpful, uh, and keep at a distance the things that are hurtful. And so, in divesting is a matter of uh, distancing ourselves from those things that are hurtful, that are harmful, even though they might taste nice or smell nice or whatever else. It's hurtful, and so when we awaken to that, like, okay, we don't need this. How do we like, maintain proper distance from the things that are providing us hurt? And then simultaneously, what are the things that are healing? This is, it might not like taste as sugary, sweet, and salty and fatty as everything else, but I'm feeling nice with this. Plants and this and the other. Investing in that, investing in things that are healthy for us, that are strengthening for us, that are healing for us, and then co-vesting, meaning that who else is investing in the same things that we're doing, and how can we like cooperate with each other and like build build what we're doing collectively. So that's like the end of the second stage. Now we get into the stage number tres. We're nearly there. We're nearly there. So this stage number tres is uplifting. And so this is when when that cooperation gets systemic, and we start to like do the routines, and we start to like cooperate with others and build with others in the things that are healthy and healing and strengthening for ourselves. And we start to build like a pattern of doing things. We start to build systems, and we start to build institutions that facilitate this, that are doing this work. And when we do that, that builds civilization. Um, and so the consideration is that when we find these things that are healing for ourselves, and because as Melange we are the earth, we are the entirety of it, it means it's healing for all our earth brethren. And that means it's non-predatory. It doesn't feed off of any one group or any other group's suffering or subjugation or oppression or anything else. It's non-predatory. So that's where we get the non-predatory civilization experience. So there are a different number of systems that are a part of this non-predatory civilization or melange civilization, and not all melange civilization is necessarily non-predatory, and not all non-predatory civilization is necessarily melange. But this is just the coalescence that I'm communicating. So within this civilization, there are a number of different systems. There's religious or religiosity, spiritual system. There's clan system. There's political system. There's economic system, and then there's a social caste system. So I'll give some basics on each of these. Melange, as like a further introduction to the concept of melange civilization and non-predatory civilization, it's a matter of uh, at this moment recognizing melange people, melange brethren, that how we are basically immigrants. We are immigrants that are arriving at a new consciousness of uh, experience, of pluralism, and just like uh, just like immigrants from another land migrate to another land and speak a different language, have different customs, and additionally, in being melange, there are different language. It's a different language. There's a different style of communication. There are different customs and protocols, and like a different kind of protocol or wisdom or way of doing things that we often we each learn just by ourselves and cope navigating through life. But then we see like other Melange brother doing, like learning how to be quiet and like get along with how other people are doing things. And it's again, it's the same experience like immigrant people do when they don't know how things are going. That's very much what the melange experience is. But the thing is, everywhere we go, that's what it is. So the consideration is, as we awaken to this experience of being immigrants, um, consciously, uh, being conscious immigrants, um, or immigrants to a new consciousness, recognizing that as we arrive into this new consciousness, finding the things that are increasingly supportive and strengthening within our experience. As I mentioned, ethics is a significant way of doing this because through the ethics, again, not just are we personally strengthened, but we strengthen the trust that others have towards us when they recognize that what we're doing is like helpful and contributing to society. People have an additional amount of trust. There's reliability when people are known as being virtuous or ethical. There's intrinsic authority that exists within ethics. When somebody's living righteous, that speaks for itself, and that's one reason why others trust. And with that authority, with that trust, there is additional allegiance and cooperation. Other groups where there may not be the same kind of blood allegiance and the blood ties. There's a certain reputation. There's a certain recognition of like, okay, that's what these people are. We can trust them. We can work with them. Not maybe as fully as we do with ourselves, but we can trust these cats. So those are some of the benefits that come with ethics. It's not the reason why we do the ethics per se, but it's some of the outcome that comes from that. So in that consideration, as we awaken to this experience of being immigrants into a new consciousness, um, there's a consideration, like immigrants do, of establishing mutual aid organizations and mutual aid institutions where we recognize that we're in similar boats, and that we have an interest in like bringing it together and helping each other. Here it is. So we're just going to continue. We're almost here. So That's something immigrants do, immigrant communities do. When immigrants are in a new community, and particularly when additional immigrants are arriving, um, pull the resources together and buy buildings, put together programs, education, training, supplies to support new immigrants and whatever the immigrants are doing. So the same thing with Melange, having mutual aid societies, mutual aid initiatives and organizations that support Melange Brethren in what we're doing, because we have different needs or different levels of needs and different extents of needs. So it's beneficial to support each other. Now, one other consideration before I go into the systems is that recognizing like the benefits and the limitations that come with the different pursuits that we maintain in this life, particularly how our wealth benefits our progeny. And when we find our occupation, when we find our grind, and we work to stack the material chips, um, how much does that actually benefit our progeny in the future? And how can we see this as evidenced from the past? And it's just kind of like as a general observation, I'll share this. When we look at riches and power, like when we stack up money, when we stack up gold, when we stack up like even political power as kings or whatever else, what we can recognize is that very often, very often, when somebody becomes very successful in one generation, that that power, that those riches, um, tend to only last for one or two generations before it dissipates into something else, get toppled over, get robbed, this and the other, economics uh, overturn or whatever else. So riches, the rich and power methodology might be successful in one generation and might even be passed on for one or two generations further. But after that, history shows how it dissipates. Now, when we talk about education, got to get schooling, got to learn something. Usually, obviously, education is for being a skilled laborer, even if the labor is through the mind. And yes, education is extremely important. However, when we rely exclusively upon education, we can recognize and we can see like the, the enduring effect of the education, maybe for one generation, it may be passed on for two or three generations in the family. But that also has a dissipating tendency as well, because it is enveloped in additional conditions as well. And it ain't a given for perpetual prosperity for one's progeny. Um, so two or three generations. Now, when we look at rituals, when a community has a way of doing things and instills it within its progeny, then we can see an increasing amount of efficacy, an increased amount of endurance that lasts four or five generations. And ain't no guarantee. And some of these can overlap amongst material affluence, education, and rituals. But rituals are an increasingly enduring trait or skill set to instill or to share with progeny. And then there's a further one, which is discipline. Haha. Am I spieling here? Discipline. In terms of the efficacy, how many generations it endures, it's still being counted. Because when we look at history, we can see that we all come from kings. All of us come from kings. We all come from slaves too. Well, at some point down the line, we come from kings and slaves. So that's the margins, and that's the acute experience. Um, and that being said, we also, for the vast majority, of people, and for the vast majority of time, um, generations. We come from the middle zone, and in that middle zone, amidst the ebbs and flows of the power and the ebbs and flows of the riches and everything else, um, amidst the ebbs and flows of the rituals of adherence and additionally. One of the things that is increasingly enduring for all of us through this day, that we're all legacies of, is a discipline, is a way of being, is a skill set that we learn from the people that raise us, usually our parents, um, of how to live in a day-to-day basis, being modest, being honest, not causing trouble, all those elements of discipline um, that's what's enduring. So it's beneficial to be increasingly intentional with that, amidst the rituals, amidst the riches, amidst the education in addition. So anyways, that's the spiel, and that's towards, again, the non-predatory civilization. Here are the systems: religion, religion, clan, political, economic, and social caste. So with religion, much of that is rituals, as I already mentioned, um, and within our melange joint, melange civilization, there is compatibility and flexibility with each of the religions of humanity, because melange emphasizes ethics, rather than per se a system of belief. And so religion tends to deal with the heaven, and melange, or I should say, much of the significant differences between religions pertains to heavenly proclamations or heavenly assertions or heavenly conclusions. Melange focuses on the earthly, on earthly economics, the earthly ethics, and the harmony that we experience on earth. And amidst that, there are many myriads of conclusions and beliefs that are maintained pertaining to the heavenly realm. So Mélanger provides itself as a uh, a cohesive um, methodology of interaction within this earthly realm, and thus there's intrinsic compatibility and flexibility with the many different religions of the earth. And so that's what can be stated regarding religious system. Um, So that's it. Now, clan system. Um, with the clan system, um, what we are cultivating is predicated upon the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederation, the Guyana Goshoa. Again, pronunciation is improving. Um, So in this clan system, it is based. It's effectively a matriarchal system. It's based upon language, the language that is spoken by the mother, the Moor, and that is conferred onto the children. And so clan affiliation has further implications because that gets into our political system, which I'm going to get into. But basically, the matriarchal leaders of each clan select the chiefs, the male chiefs, to be the political administrators, to deal with government and security, and make those decisions. The matriarchs elect or decide who what male from the clan is going to be the chiefs to sit in the circle and make those decisions. And then also matriarchal clans contribute 10%, 10% of income towards the cooperative system. Um, so those are some like the basic components of the clan system, and like how it operates. Now we go into the political system. Uh, First off, the political system is an ethocracy. Oh, I got it out. Ethocracy. Basically, it is a rule of ethics, and so through that, it's other than a democracy of rule of people per se, of people having a vote. It's other than a dictatorship or a monarchy of a rule of a king or a despot. It's a matter of ethics, and people who ascend through the hierarchy of the political system are those who practice an increasingly strict and austere ethical discipline. And through that, anybody can do that. Anybody can decide to practice that kind of ethical discipline, um, but that involves actually doing it and being held accountable for doing that or for not doing it. So anybody can do it, and those who do it are the ones who make the decisions. Now, in making the decisions are made through consensus process, and that's just it. As I mentioned before, the chiefs, the clan chiefs, the chiefs who are selected by the matriarchal clans, are making decisions regarding government, and much of the process of the consensus building of autocracy is predicated upon delegation, and knowing how and when to delegate an issue, a matter of concern, a dilemma to a committee, to a leader, to make a decision accordingly based upon the expertise, the talents, the skill set of that leader. And so that's a significant part of the political system of the ethocracy. Um, so Oh, the chiefs also practice adhere to the limited vow, which is those five ethics that I mentioned: honesty, sobriety, veganism, marital fidelity, and ethical economics. And matriarchal, the clan matriarchs also adhere to that fivefold ethical discipline as well, as part of the responsibility that comes with that leadership. Um, so that was not economic system. The, the economic system is basically a socialist system where basically it just means that the basic needs of every person, every being is met: food, shelter, clothing, health, education, along those lines. That is met by society. So um, the, the ethical component details that are involved in the economic system pertain to native, vegan, labor, finance, environmental, and health. So native meaning within Melange experience. I didn't put this yet, but there's the Melange Creed. I don't know if I'm going to get into that too much stuff at this moment today. Because we're already this almost nearly an hour. We're going, they're approaching that. But anyways, native, there's amongst our Melange experience, there is intrinsic and fundamental deference towards our native brethren, and recognizing that wherever we go, we're effectively a stranger because our heritage, our ancestry, our lineage comes from different lands. And so we do have a certain amount of qualification, and qualification by that I mean a certain amount of um, again, just basic deference to those who are rooted within the land that we're coming from or that we're living in. So that's just part of the intrinsic part of being knowledge. It doesn't mean we still are respected and have due respect additionally, but it's a matter of having deference towards native. Now that being said, that's when native brethren are native brethren and behave or live with a native discipline and native tradition with native technology. Anytime a native community, a native brethren, a native nation goes outside of that native um, habitat to reap some benefit from another land, from another tribe, from another um, whatever, another geography, people from another geography, then that's not native at that point. And then we do have additional amount of standing concerning the conditions involved in that. So there's a fine balance, a lot of details that come with that. But anyways, that's part of the notion of when we make economic decisions about how we our relationship with the elements, with the nature and each other. It's with that with recognition and deference to native. Again, vegan is part of it, and being having a discipline of ahimsa along those lines, nonviolence, um, labor, making sure people are provided, compensated in a fair way, finance, no debt, and honesty within how contracts and ventures are are arranged. Environmental, making sure that however we draw from the earth, Mother Earth in Amaka, that we are providing due respect and harmony within Amaka, and for the well-being of all life on this earth and in this universe. And then health, making sure we're healthy, and making sure that our economic decisions are promoted our health. So those are some of the specific ethical considerations when it comes to economics. Um, Now, when it comes to the social caste system, um, there is a effective dual caste system, and by that it's meant that there's an option. One can either follow in the same caste occupation of one's far and do the same thing that the far does, and follow along those lines, or do a personal occupation, do something else. There are pluses and minuses with each of those approaches. When it comes to following in the occupation, the caste occupation of the family, there's increased stability. There's a knowledge set. There's increased cohesion within the family. But there's then the minus is that there's rigidity. Lines are drawn. Divisiveness emerges, and additionally, so in the personal occupation route, in that option, where a person says, "Hey, I want to do something else. I want to do. I'm doing. I'm being led to do something else." Then there are pluses and minuses with that. The pluses is that there's an increased amount of liberty and flexibility, innovation, inspiration that is unpredictable. But then there's also a certain amount of insecurity and an increased amount of distance within the relations within the family, and that has an effect on society as well. So, but that's each one's own prerogative, as it always is. But it's just a matter of society uh, absorbing each of those methodologies within the fabric of and the framework of society and the civilization, so that when one makes a decision along those lines, it's still part of the norm of civilization and society. That being said, all individuals are effectively trained in two ways, in two capacities. One in an intellectual capacity and in a physical capacity. For an intellectual occupation and for a physical occupation. Um, and that is a way, that is a method of having proper respect, regardless of what one specializes in, actually like derives a livelihood from. Still having a knowledge set and experience within an occupation of the other set, whether it's one is an intellectual, like an engineer or a lawyer or something like that, but still having experience at working in the field as an agrarian, knowing how to pick weeds and things like that. Having a due respect for that, and experience and respect for that, so there's an increased amount of cohesion within society. And then there's a plus one with this, in that each individual is also provided or gains certain experience within a leisure occupation, meaning the arts, music, craft, sport, something along those lines. But having a due balance, so that there's an increased amount of cohesion amongst the different factions, clans, and ways of doing things, religions, and everything else within society. So two occupations, two plus one occupations within the economic system. And then one final element within the economic system is fair measure, and identifying what that is. So the fair measure is yeah, the fair measure is the methodology for pricing products and services within the economy. Um, this is the methodology for finding the fair price. It's a matter of identifying the total amount of land that exists on Earth where crops can be cultivated, identifying the effective yield or the potential yield of a grain. If all of the land were utilized to grow that grain, how much could we actually be yielded within 1 year? And then dividing that by the number of people, the population of Earth, and that would be each individual share of the total crop for that year. And so then we divide that by 2,000, which is the number of hours in a year, basically in a full-time job. 2,000. If you do 40, uh, 40 hours a week at 50 weeks, that's basically 2,000. So 40 hours a week at 50 weeks, that's 2,000 hours per year. So if we divide that total share of the grain, or the grain, the grain crop, by 2,000 hours, that's the hourly rate. And so based on the hourly rate, we discern the fair price accordingly. We can make decisions on our exchanges, market prices, based upon that standard. And everybody has a certain intrinsic, intuitive sense of valuation, because there's a tangibility with that. And so that's how we establish the fair rate. Now, um, this is the last page, almost there. Um, when it comes to the social caste system, I mentioned the dual caste system already, but uh, the social caste system, in terms of like the hierarchy, how it's established, within the context of ethics, it is that there's like a hierarchy, and that might seem counterintuitive to what I described in terms of non-predatory, this and the other, um, but this is where it is at the moment. As I said, this is provisional. And it's actually, I'm not even, this is actually ancient. So I'm just communicating it. But in terms of like melange civilization, I just share it as it is at the moment. The top tier, there's actually two joints. One is the monastic life, where there's adherence to a strict ethical vow, and then the other one is an ethical discipline where there's adherence to a limited ethical vow, but not effectively monastic. So that's both of those are part of the two tier. One being further stricter than the other. The second tier, tier numero dos, is accepting guidance. What the Buddha, and it is based upon teaching again from the Kudzadanta Sutta of the Buddha. But the second tier is accepting guidance, and basically that means studying the rituals, accepting the guidance, but not actually practicing or taking a vow to practice the ethics. The third stage is the gift of dwelling places, which is basically philanthropy. The fourth stage, stage numero cuatro, is perpetual alms, which means like regular, modest giving to support um, to support the community, support charitable interests, and additionally, and then the cinco is the cinco stage is open largesse, meaning like irregular, grandiose kind of contributions, which might seem big, but it's actually just like one-off type stuff. So it's still beneficial, but it's kind of like the least favorable type of ethical or contribution to society. So that's the hierarchy. And again, the thing with this with the autocracy is anybody can ascend or descend based upon people's own prerogative and individual decisions. So when people commit towards a certain practice, then this is a matter of uh, um, strengthening the system and institution of that recognition and predication upon it. So there it is. Um, the Buddha also teaches a process for personal um, strengthening. And as we like sum up this, yeah, there's too much to go in. All right. Um, as we sum up this joint of the second stage, actually, this is the third stage. Yeah. So Buddha teaches a three-step process for strengthening um, our walk in society. The first is the noble discipline of living a righteous behavior. And the Buddha teaches that when we live a righteous behavior, that gives us the opportunity for being increasingly mindful of enhancing our concentration, our thoughtfulness, our understanding of the way things are. And so that's the second stage. It's having a noble concentration um, and and um, and being mindful. Where before we might have been caught up in the rat race or whatever, when we're righteous and we like pull back from the things that are harmful, then we have additional opportunity to like reflect about things and think about it, concentrate it, and then be intentional and continuing to do things that are healthy and healing and righteous. And when we do that, that we get to the third stage or the third step, which is noble insight or um, perspective or gifts, something along those lines. But basically, when we cultivate that mindfulness, that concentration, there are certain capabilities that are provided um, that are less evident and visible um, by the senses. So that's the third stage. So I just said that as part of that education system. I didn't mention that actually in the first joint because it's not in the notes. But the final system in this joint is education system. So obviously, part of the element of it is pluralism, um, and that's a pluralism of culture and teachings and heritage within what we share with our students. Um, and an additional element of this is that rather than particularly when it comes to history and human civilization or Earth civilization, rather than emphasizing the militaristic exploits and conquests within history. It's a matter of emphasizing the innovations. What are the inventions? What are the new ideas, the new tools, the new methodologies that revolutionize or that significantly influence um, villages, cities, societies, and civilizations, providing competitive advantages. Yes, so often these are translated into militaristic benefits, but how does like electricity, how does paper, how does the golden rule, how do these things, how do these innovations change and like evolve humanity, evolve society? That's what the emphasis is, the history. And so that's that. So within the educational methodology, there are certain basic concepts like cinco areas of civilization, Mediterranean being the land surrounding the Mediterranean Sea, and then um, Asia being the land to the east, Africa being the land to the south, Europe being the land to the north, and Tinoterrania being the western hemisphere to the west. So those are the 5 areas of civilization to have like a component, a framework to like perceive and understand things and compartmentalize things. Compartmentalize things. It's easier to study things and remember things accordingly. And then further, we have about 7 ethnic groups that are basically along the lines of this 5 areas of civilization geographically, but obviously a little bit further differentiation when it comes to ethnic. Um, I ain't going to get into the details of that at the moment. And then the other element is there are actually like 9 or 10 nueve or diez um, linguistic clans. So basically, these are just like the predominant or the major ethnic, or excuse me, the major linguistic groups or linguistic traditions, collectives, lineages within Earth, within humanity. And again, it's a matter of being mindful of this as in terms of remembering it. And I can't remember, but it's other than a priority at the moment. Um, but also studying it accordingly, and also particularly this language is an important thing in the knowledge experience, and studying multiple languages, having proficiency in an appropriate breadth of linguistic groups rather than just knowing 18 languages in one linguistic group, which is legit and that's fine. But particularly for Melange brethren who are inclined towards such, having a certain amount of linguistic proficiency in a broad spectrum of linguistic groups. So I'm going to backtrack and just say the ethnic groups. It's 7. Let's see: East Asian, South Asian, uh, Mediterranean, which includes Arab and Israeli, um, Iberian, European, African, and Native, Western Hemisphere. Those 5, those 7. Those are the 7 ethnic groups. And then the 9 or 10 linguistic groups. This is going to be a little bit further of a stretch. We have Chinese, we have Desi-based Sanskrit related languages. We have Arabic, we have Hebrew, we have Cyrillic, which includes Russian, Greek, and additionally, we have Germanic or Scandinavian, which is the Northern European, African, 7, Native, and I think that was 8. I think Latin was the other one. And then mélanger, meaning like a mix, because that's the nature of language. It's continued process of evolution. Mélanger being the 10th one. So, anyways, I'm gonna leave it at that. That's my rough estimation at the moment. The other category, as a basic frame of reference within our studies and in our practice, and additionally, are the river zones. So, amidst the Earth, there are basically around 35 or so, 35 major rivers on all the different continents, effectively around the Earth. And so, in terms of like understanding the topography of the Earth and how that affects civilization, recognizing how humanity tends to gather along oceans and rivers, and particularly where rivers meet oceans. Having an understanding of where the oceans are, the major bodies of water, and including the fresh water in the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere, the Northern Hemisphere, and then the Southern Hemisphere. That's a little bit of a mind teaser right there, a brain teaser. But also the rivers, knowing where the major rivers are, and then understanding human civilization within the context of those rivers because our souls grow deep like the rivers. That's a reference. Um, so there are about 35 river zones. And that's another frame of reference for understanding civilization and perpetuating civilization. So concluding this joint, Mélanger Ethos Institute. Uh, as we get into like next steps, well, we're concluding this joint of third stage of uplifting. Our Mélanger Ethos Institute has certain priorities to perpetuate this awakening and this strengthening and this upliftment. Our priorities include Mélanger education and pluralism education, ethical economics, residential cooperatives, and mutual aid initiatives that I mentioned before. That's what we focus on to further this process of evolution and such. So that brings us to the next steps, like what we do at this moment um, in this fourth stage of the next steps. So the first of these, or a primary one of these primary one of these next steps is the mutual aid initiatives and pooling our resources to support ourselves collectively and respectively. And so the priorities that we have with Melanie Ethos Institute additionally along these mutual aid initiatives includes communication and strengthening our systems of communication, but also our regularity of communication amongst our different groups, our different communities, and initiatives and conferences in addition. The next joint is educational materials, having materials that are shared with other Melanie brethren to like show like this is the thing. And this is an example of a materials that is shared as a frame of reference, as an educational tool. Um, and there are additional materials as well. So that's one of the priorities is compiling, publishing these materials, and distributing these materials to increase awareness, to increase confidence, to increase knowledge, and to increase participation, cooperation, contribution, and mutual aid in addition. So, and then the third element again is the ethical economics. So, it's a matter of, again, ethics are a significant part of our cohesion, the nature of our cohesion, and that includes exactly how we sustain ourselves, how we support ourselves economically. So, a big part of a big priority is strengthening and building ethical cooperatives, so that we are practicing what is preached, what we preach. Um, so there's that. Now, along the lines of the cooperatives, that's the further next steps. Cultural cooperatives, when we share the stories, our songs, with each other and with others, locally within our villages, but then also collectively around the earth, and amongst our many different villages. That also includes residential cooperatives and being villages. It includes food cooperatives, school cooperatives, utility cooperatives, security cooperatives, transportation cooperatives, and additional. Um, it's all a matter of strengthening the integrity of well-being, self-determination, authenticity in who we are in our walk as Melanie and as continuing carriers of the legacies of our ancestors and our heritage. So those are the next steps. And then further steps are, with all these systems in cooperation, establishing a currency, an ethics-based currency that facilitates exchanges along those lines. People talk about Bitcoin, stuff like that, but anyways, that it's along those lines. It's still going on. Now, finally, on all of all this journey, after an hour,
these next steps include conventional negotiations, talking with conventional institutions and constituencies um, to optimally facilitate this process. That includes property, property and territory claims, and our stewardship, our compacts of stewardship on the land where we live, open trade agreements, ethical empowerment zones, world social work, um, citizenship recognition within the different lands of our heritage, but also as lange citizens and world citizens. Um, Communication systems, as I mentioned before, and building on the grid infrastructure as well as off the grid infrastructure. And additionally, those are just some of the elements. This involves diplomacy with governments, with intergovernment organizations, with the UN system, with local governments, with businesses, corporations, and commercial enterprises, with religious communities, with cultural groups, and additionally. So it involves the breadth of this type of interaction, understanding, and communication, and cooperation. So that's where it is. And guess what? That's where we go. That's it. That's a wrap. I'll leave it at that. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Zajin. Adios. Tejargis. Asipin Asamu. Kill it with Fred. One love. Peace.